Yeah, so my name is Lindsay Walsh. I don't actually go to this church, I'm sorry. But I do help with the outreach program here. And I just want to thank you, first of all, for being so positive about that outreach ministry. It is something that I know that we are all very proud of because it's something that like we can see God move in every single time that we're there. But I'm not a ministry major, so this isn't going to be a sermon because I don't know how to do that. But I do know how to tell stories, and I have a couple stories to share about my time in Africa. But before I do that, I want to thank you for donating to my trip. You guys were actually, the money that you gave me, it was the money that made me able to go on this trip. I almost couldn't go. So God really used you in a way to provide for me so that I could provide for so many people in Burkina Faso. So yeah, I'm gonna tell you about my trip. So if you don't know where Burkina Faso is, it's in West Africa. It's right on top of Mali, which is a very dangerous place. There's a lot of terrorists that come into Burkina Faso, and so while we're there, we had to make sure that we were safe and also keeping the kids safe. So what we were doing there was we were teaching English to college-age students and high school students. And because Africa is such a unsafe place, learning English helps them further their education so that they're able to get good jobs and get themselves out of that place that is not safe or helpful for them as children. When we went, we decided that we were bringing books because they don't have access to a lot of English books because they're very expensive to ship all the way there. So with your help, we brought over 400 pounds of books. We brought children's books to like Bibles for the college-age students and a bunch of books in between. And a lot of them were actually Christian books, which was very cool because when we went to the university, most of them are Muslim or animist. So they actually had the opportunity to choose to read those books, and many of them chose Christian books to read. And while this wasn't really an evangelistic mission trip, it was to open the doors to people that don't normally get to hear the gospel. So all the people that were there got to hear about Jesus, even though we weren't actually preaching about it. We also brought 72 toothbrushes and toothpastes to the kids there. Hygiene is something that they don't really have access to, especially like teeth care, because it's expensive and time consuming for them when their most important thing that they're looking for is food. So along with that, we brought over 200 school bags and slates. So you helped send 200 children to school for the first time with backpacks and slates that they're able to write on and do their homework on, which is amazing because most of them can't afford paper. They can't afford pencils. So the slates are a great way. We donated chalk along with the slates. So we got to go into the village that actually is going to be using them, and all the children were so excited about the book bags because they love going to school so much, which is a little different sometimes than here. But many of the kids were crying. They were so happy, and all of the parents were so grateful. Even though they couldn't speak English, they would give us hugs. And you could tell that they knew that we loved them, even if we didn't believe the same religion as them. And that's just another way that we were opening doors for people to learn more about the gospel without actually preaching, because we were going through the United Nations, so we actually could not preach the gospel actively because we were in public schools. But by being able to donate all of these things from a church, you're able to show people that Christians love other people without even without saying it. They know that we love them, and they know that you're a church that has provided for them, and they're so grateful for that. And while we were on our off time when we weren't teaching, we were actually evangelizing to the kids that were in the city that we were staying in. We were staying in the capital city of Ouagadougou, and there's actually a mosque that was about a block down the road from us. And the kids, when it wasn't their time to be at mosque, they would come and play with us. So we gave them over 50 evangelism bracelets and booklets to share the gospel to them too. Many of them didn't speak English, but we had our translator who was there and was able to tell them what we were saying. And while a lot of them probably didn't understand because they were young, they know that the Nazarene compound that we were staying at is a safe place for them. And again, it's just reinforcing the idea that even though we don't believe the same religion, we're still open and helping them, and they're more likely to want to come back and because they feel that love. So that will help them to learn more and then soon hopefully believe in our God. And it was just an amazing opportunity to see all of these kids. They'd come in off the street. Some of them had disabilities and weren't allowed in school. They were not able to go to school. They were not able to get the education that they would need to help further their lives and help them be in a place where they're not succumb to poverty. And we were able to teach those kids. And actually, while we were there, one of the girls who has cerebral palsy, who's not allowed in school, she was baptized. And we got to see her in her baptism clothes, and she had her hair all done up, and she was in a white dress, and she was so excited to show us that she was getting baptized, because one of the reasons that she was because the team before us had shared the gospel to her family. And so it was just an amazing thing to see how many kids we could impact without directly being able to talk to them. They speak French for the most part there. I took a couple of classes of French and I'm very bad at it. So I could talk to a 4-year-old and that was about it. But it was really awesome to see how God was moving in a way that we didn't need that language. You didn't need to speak English, you didn't need to speak French, or you didn't need to speak the tribal language there, because they understand love and we understand love. And it's something that I am eternally grateful for, that I was able to go there. I was there for 3 weeks, and we taught about, I think it was 12 different classes, all 3 hours of English. And some of the things that we talked about were health and hygiene, so that's when we were able to give the toothbrushes. We talked about geography, which was exciting because they got to learn about new places in America, and they said that they want a vacation here sometime, so maybe they'll come and visit the church. I think that's cool. But we also got to teach the global goals, which are 17 goals voted on by the United Nations to help make the world a better place. We decided to do gender equality because a lot of the people there don't believe that women are anything more than just people that should have children. So a lot of the kids are married or a lot of the girls are married at 15 or 16, and they start having children right away, and that's their only job. So we decided that to help really show kids what their full potential is, and show them what God created them to be, that we would teach them gender equality. So we taught them that women are able to go to school for longer than high school. We taught them that they're able to hold a job, especially in a place where it seems that that's not the social norm. And one of the really amazing things that I got to see, and I think it was a God moment to me, was this girl came in, and I don't know her name, but she came in, and at first when we were talking about it, we had them raise their hands and for different questions. And one of the questions was that women are not as good at anything as men. It was something like that. Like they're not as equal. And she raised her hand. And it made me sad because they don't know that they're all equal in God's eyes, and God loves them so much that it doesn't matter whether or not they're a girl or they're a boy. It doesn't matter if they if their family sells fruit on the side of the street, or if they work in the big city. They didn't understand that. And as we were talking and as we were explaining that everybody, while we have different traits, we're still equal because we're human. And as she began to realize that, she started to raise her hand and speak her mind. And she shared with me that her family, all of her sisters were already married, and they were like 16, 17. And she didn't want to be like that. She wanted to go to college, and she wanted to get a job. She wanted to be a teacher. And seeing that was just great from the time and half hour before, where all she wanted to do was say that she wasn't as good as her male counterparts, to where she says, I want to go to college and I want to be a teacher. I want to teach kids that they're important, that they're loved, and that they matter. And that's something that I think that I will cherish for a very long time, because it might not be specifically gospel related, but God is working in that girl. Because now she has the confidence to go to college, and she has the confidence to have her own beliefs, and she's able to maybe disagree with her family on maybe religion or other societal norms. She gets to say, this is what I believe, and maybe that means that she'll follow the Lord, because I don't know her religion. I don't know what she believes, but statistically, she doesn't believe in God. So the fact that she has that confidence now is something that I think is 100% a God moment, because God was showing her that she is created equal just like everybody else in that place, and she should have the confidence to show what she believes and why she believes it. That's something that I'll cherish for a very long time, and I can't thank you enough for giving me that opportunity. This mission trip was one of the hardest mission trips I've been on. We were there for 3 weeks. We did not have running water most of the time. We did not have air conditioning, which seems very first world and like not important. But it's something that showed me that if I'm going to serve the Lord with everything that I have, then I need to be willing to go where I'm uncomfortable or where I'm not exactly happy all the time. Amen. And it was such an amazing opportunity to learn so much more about myself in that. So there were times where I got sick and I didn't want to teach. And I'm not a teacher either. I'm not a teaching major. I'm not in education. So that was difficult for me. But every time that I thought, I don't want to do this, I thought, what if the disciples didn't want to do what God was telling them to do? Where would we be? Because if they hadn't followed Jesus, then we wouldn't be where we are today. And maybe I'm not obviously as great as they were, and I don't know as much about the Lord, but I do know that by teaching kids English, that they're able to go and get a job and be more than they think that they should be. They're able to fulfill what God wants them to do with all those opportunities that they have. And so even when I didn't want to get out of bed because I hadn't been able to sleep because it was so hot, I was able to find my strength in the Lord, which I think sometimes when you're here and you have all of these really nice things like air conditioning, heat, running water, you kind of forget that like you're supposed to rely on the Lord so much. And I really remembered in those moments where I felt so uncomfortable and low that my strength did not come from myself. My strength came from the God that sent me to Africa. Because if we look at all of the facts, I shouldn't have gone. The trip was for English education majors. I am a political science major. I almost didn't have the funds to go. There was a terrorist attack 3 weeks before we were supposed to leave. All of these facts that you look at, they say that I shouldn't go because I'm not qualified and I didn't feel good enough to be there. But if I wasn't good enough to be there, then God wouldn't have sent me and used me in that way. And it was just an amazing opportunity to get to serve the Lord in a way that I've never been able to do that before. I've never taught English. Can't say I'm the best at it, but that's okay. I am just so thankful for your support and your love, because I know that whenever we posted something on Facebook, the limited times that we had internet, you guys would love on it, and you would send us encouragement and thankfulness for us going. And every time that I read that, all I could think about was how thankful I was for you. It was so exciting to be able to share that with you. And I'm just really happy to be here, because I think that it's so great for you guys to hear what I actually did. Because sometimes you don't actually hear what missionaries get to do. And while I'm not technically a missionary, I've just gone on a mission trip, it's very exciting that I get to share my experience with you. It's something that I wish that I could relive all the time. And it's something that I really can't thank you enough for. Thank you for your support and your faithfulness to God, because I know that sometimes it's difficult sending somebody to a country that you don't know where it is, when you don't even know the person that you're sending. But I can't thank you enough. And thank you for letting me speak today. Hope I did all right.
Lindsay, just tell us one thing. What are you doing this semester? I know, but they need to hear.
This semester? Well, this semester we're helping out here, obviously. But I am also the Kankakee County State's Attorney's intern. So I get to be in that office, but I also get to share the gospel with people that don't necessarily hear it all the time. You would think that an office would be a professional place where there's not a lot of things that are they're not great things are talked about, obviously, because it is the criminal court, so there are a lot of really terrible things that are going on here. But I'm able to work with the witnesses and victims of those crimes and be there for them and show them love in a way that I think that God has really called me to, but also minister to the people in my office and show them that even though I do want to at some point work in law, that I don't have to be as cynical or rude or mean as some of the people that work there are, which is very exciting, because it's an opportunity I didn't think that I would have this semester. But yeah, so thank you for your support.
Stop. Listen. These are some of the words that I came up with as I was reflecting upon my time in Ecuador. Pastor told me all the way back in the spring that I would be speaking today, and throughout my entire experience, even before I got back, I reflected on what I would say. And those two words are what came up. Stop. Listen. I thought it would be kind of interesting to pray in Spanish before we start, because I was in Ecuador, and Ecuador is a Spanish-speaking country. So bow your heads with me. Gracias, Dios, por este día. Ayúdanos en todas de nuestras cosas. Enséñanos. Está con nosotros en todo de nuestras cosas y nuestras vidas. Ayúdame y ayúdanos, Dios, en todo. Gracias, Dios. Gracias, Dios. Amen. The very first couple of weeks of my trip were very rough. As you might guess, that was mainly because of Spanish. I had spoken Spanish for many years, but I had never grown accustomed to speaking on such a regular basis, speaking 24/7. I'd only ever spoken in a class for no more than an hour and a half at a time. And because of this, it was very hard for me to express myself. I felt very alone because I could not speak. But through all of this, I was forced to stop and listen because I could not speak. And through stopping and listening, I was able to much better learn Spanish, and I was much better able to listen and understand to those around me. Another one of the things I learned was about cultural differences. Obviously, if you're in another country full of so many different things and so many different people and so many different ideas, you'll start to notice a lot of cultural differences. One of the things I noticed was specifically in the church, and it was specifically prayer. They pray a lot different than we do. The prayers are often a lot longer. A lot of times we'll have like a prayer at the beginning and end of a sermon, and they do too, but they end up talking for a very, very long time. There was one time I very badly had to go to the bathroom at the end of a service, and they finally finished, and then they started praying. They prayed for 20 minutes, and then they finally stopped, and I went back to the bathroom because I thought they were done, and when I came back, they'd started praying again. Prayer was much longer, but also it was very communal and yet very personal. There was one time when we all stood around in a circle and grabbed each other's hands, and we just prayed. The pastor led, but we prayed. And we prayed for, like I said, quite a long time, 10 to 15 minutes. But it wasn't just the pastor praying. Each individual person was putting in their own prayer. They were listening to the words of the pastor, but they were making it their own. And they would often interject while the pastor was speaking and say something like, "Thank you, God," or "Help me, God, in this thing. Help me to be strong," etc., etc. Because the Ecuadorians had learned to stop and listen. They weren't just speaking the words, they were listening to God, they were listening to each other, and they wanted him to come down and be a part of that prayer, be a part of that conversation. They stopped and listened. One of the most profound experiences of my trip was when we went to a waterfall. I had still been struggling with the relationships I'd made there and with Spanish, so I had a little bit of conflict inside me. But on one of our trips, we decided to hike up to a waterfall, and I noticed that it felt kind of familiar, but I didn't think much of it, and we got up to the waterfall, and we began to swim in it. And we swam in it, and even long after most people would have just gotten up and left because it was freezing, we continued to stay and to swim. I learned later, or rather, I realized later, that that was the same waterfall that I had been baptized in 4 years before, the very same one in Ecuador that I had been baptized in on my very first trip to Ecuador. There were no words spoken to me from God that day. In fact, it was completely silent except for the sound of the water crashing over me. But I stopped and I listened, and although no words were spoken, I felt the sound of the waterfall give me comfort, and it was like I was being baptized all over again. This part is going to be a little bit hard for me to talk about. Ecuador tends to bring up things. Every single time I go, there's always conflict inside. And what usually happens is I'll be struggling with it for the duration of my trip, and then towards the end, it'll all come to a resolution, and I'll enjoy my last couple of days there, maybe last couple of weeks. But this time, the conflict came, but there was no resolution. I got back, and I continued to struggle and wrestle, and I don't know what it was I was struggling and wrestling with. It was like Jacob wrestling with the angel. He knew he was wrestling, but he was never 100% sure why. And I continued to wrestle, and I tried to bury it deep down, but because I couldn't solve it. And one day, it all came to a head and exploded inside me, and it beat me down for many days. And at the end of it, I was sick, so sick of feeling that way. And I went back to my dorm room, I laid down on my bed, and I put my headphones in to listen to music, and I just screamed at God and yelled at him. for putting me in that position. Why did I have to feel this way? Why couldn't I just win one time? But most of all, where were you, God? Why wouldn't you answer me? Tell me what to do. And I continued to fight and fight and fight, but even through that, I heard two words in my head: stop, listen. But I did not want to listen. I was not done talking to you, God. And I felt a thought come into my head that wasn't my own, but I still fought, and I said, no, I am not ready to stop talking. I'm not ready to listen. You listen to me, but God was done listening to my pain. And he said, you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to fight anymore. And I laid there for a few minutes. I checked my watch, hopped out of bed, and I wiped my eyes, and I went off to class as if everything were right as rain. And it was. Everything was right as rain in that moment. God often speaks to us in our darkest moments. And sometimes if we just stop and listen, he will say exactly what we need to hear. I wasn't sure I wanted to do this, but I think I will. As I was thinking about what to speak about this week and reflecting upon it, I felt a stanza from a song come into my head. And I'm not the best singer, so please give me grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Dear God, please be with us. Remind us to stop and to listen, and know that we are stopping and listening. We want to hear what you have to say. We want you to guide us. Please be there with us and remind us to every once in a while stop and listen. Amen.